question at the moment of Yaakov's ultimate is, who are you? Who are you? Who do you belong to? Right? Limiata. Where or who are you? Where are you going? And who's in front of you? Meaning, who is, and these are three critical things that we have to be not just asking ourselves. These are three critical things that, especially in a time of challenge, especially in a time of isolation, especially in a time of additional augmented and amplified vulnerability, that we ask ourselves, who are we? Because the values we have, what we want to define in our homes, for our family, with our spouses, with our children, who are we? Where are we going? Where do we want to take this ship? Where do we want to land? Where is the goal and the prize of what we want to be? What do we want?
Welcome, everybody. Good evening. Nice to see you. We'll be beginning in 3 minutes. Hang on tight. Hi, guys. We'll begin in 2 minutes. Welcome. Thanks for joining. People are still entering. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Meaningful Jewish Living. Tonight is our Chanukah Workshop. Excited to share some insights and some how-to practical guidelines for the Festival of Chanukah, which is coming up next week. In just a few moments, I'll share my screen and allow everybody to see tonight's source material. Some of you asked and are wondering what happened to the final installation of Meaningful Jewish Living. That is going to take place not next week, but the week after. We have been journeying together on a topic of meaningful Jewish living, covering from birth to baby naming and circumcision to engagement and wedding. And the final component is the Jewish approach to death and mourning, which will happen, as I mentioned, in a few weeks. There will be no class next Thursday night because of Chanukah. So please mark your calendars. There is plenty of Chanukah programming, and hope those of you who are interested are able to join us both in person and virtually, beginning with our opportunity to light Chanukah candles together as a community virtually every night of Chanukah, except for Friday night at 8 p.m. to 8:20, 20 minutes, just a chance to gather around virtually together with Rachel, me, and the kids, and have a chance to experience the joy of Chanukah together. Also, Chanukah in the Park, a highlight every year. Carl Shows Park next Sunday, check information, and as well as some WhatsApp group special for Chanukah. Lots of Chanukah activity and share. Any questions? Okay, let's begin. The holiday of Chanukah. Oh, let some people in the waiting room. The holiday of Chanukah is an extremely joyous holiday. It's a festive celebration that we experience every single year. Even greater than the festivity of Chanukah itself is the joy and the excitement that perhaps our children and the younger generation feel at this time of year. Chanukah also inspires a deep Jewish pride. We feel proud, we feel strong, because on Chanukah we think of the Chanukah story. We think of the revolt against the Greeks. We think about how we were able to maintain our values and traditions in the face of the Greek ideology and the Hellenism, which was sweeping through the areas, and that was ultimately threatening Jewish survival. So we're going to explore tonight exactly what is the miracle of Chanukah. We're going to take perhaps what everybody knows and flip it on its head by adding a deeper and perhaps not so well-known aspect of Chanukah. And then we'll spend some time talking about how to celebrate Chanukah. There are many Jewish festivals throughout the calendar, and each of the festivals comes at the perfect time, both when we need some inspiration and throughout the as individuals and also as a community. And this year we'll be celebrating Chanukah in the backdrop of this pandemic. And I don't need to go off on too much of a tangent to let everybody know that this pandemic has gone on for longer than we thought it was. And we had no idea how long it was going to take. And we still actually don't know when the outcome and what it's going to be and how it will be. Thank God there is such tremendous positive news coming out about a vaccine and timeline for a vaccine. But Chanukah this year is ever more important. Because Chanukah allows us to dig deep into the wells of Jewish inspiration, recognizing a story and a miracle that happened thousands of years ago, and finding the continued relevancy and inspirational nuggets that can power us through both the cold winter and the dark days that lie ahead. So by exploring a background of historical significance of Chanukah, by understanding a little bit about what it means and why it's relevant, I hope for each of us individually and collectively that Chanukah this year will serve as warmth and illumination and bring much light to what seems sometimes to be a very dark world. So chronologically, what you need to know about Chanukah is it's the last holiday. And it's the final holiday that happens before the destruction of the Second Temple and the 2,000-year exile of the Jewish people, which we're still enduring. The light of Chanukah, the spiritual lift that it gives our people, is eternal. Now, in a couple of months, hopefully when we're able to get together in person, we're going to spend about 6 weeks exploring Jewish history. That's not going to happen tonight, but you need to know just that this is the last festival that happened to the Jewish people. Can you all see the screen? Yes? Great. And I hope I'm showing the slides and nothing that is embarrassingly on my desktop as well. Okay. Hi, everybody. You can wave, you can unmute yourself, say hi. You know, teaching over Zoom, it's all very different and all very challenging. We are not in the same room together, but we do need to feel connected with one another as best as possible. Okay, Rabbi Beryl Wine used to live here in the tri-state area, upstate New York. He now lives in Israel. He's a prolific Jewish thinker. He's a philosopher, but he's best known for his beautiful articulation of Jewish history. And if you are a history buff and want to grow your Jewish library, then his books are tremendous, and I really recommend them. But here he writes very clearly a little bit about the military victory of the festival of Chanukah. So let's have a look about what he writes. About the year 166 BCE, a group finally stood up to the Greeks. Matisyahu and his family, known as the Hasmoneans. They are a noble descent of the priestly class, the Kohanim, including those who served as high priests. They lived in a small town called Modi'in. It's about 12 miles northwest of Jerusalem. The town still exists today and is about 20 miles midwest of Jerusalem. Important pieces here that the Hasmoneans were of the priestly descent. So they had an elevated status within the Jewish people. Certainly its relevance and its important is both historical and also these tribes continue through to today. But also know that the town where it takes place is still an active town in the land of Israel. One day, a Greek contingent marched in, set up an altar, gathered all the Jews, and forced them to sacrifice a non-kosher animal to Zeus. Who was Zeus? Anybody?
God.
A?
God. Greek god.
Correct. A Greek god. Zeus. Zoom is a god that we're all using now. But Zeus, not to be confused with Zoom, was a Greek god. So what did they do here? They marched into the Holy Temple, the most sacred physical space that we have as a people. And they set up an altar and they brought a sacrifice to a non-Jewish god. You can't think of anything worse to do in the most holiest of places of the Jewish people. They then asked a Jewish volunteer, when you think it couldn't get worse, you know what, we're going to set it up, but you do this for us. You defy your history and your religion, and you bring a non-kosher, non-Jewish illegal sacrifice in the temple. One step forward, he approached the altar. Matisyahu stabbed him to death. Chaos broke out. The Greek army attempted to subdue the crowd, and the Jews were armed and defeated by the Greek patrol. There was no turning back now. Matisyahu had 5 sons, all of whom were pious, committed Jews, and their names are listed there. They ran to the caves and organized an army, not to fight an open war, but a guerrilla war. Originally, they organized a force of about 3,000 men, eventually grew to 6,000 and never reached more than 12,000 men. This is important. Now, I was going to show a clip from Gladiator, one of my favorite films, both because I like films and I like war films, but also because Russell Crowe is, where's Russell Crowe from? Anyone?
Australia.
That's actually incorrect. And I'm an Australian. He's actually from New Zealand. He thinks he's from Australia. Google it. You'll see the truth. But anyway, my mother's born in Auckland, which is in New Zealand. So I'm proud of both my Australian heritage and my Kiwi origins. But Russell Crowe, great actor, great film. You have to understand what this meant. This is a militia guerrilla group. And they're Jews, right? They're not so athletic. And they're probably weren't in shape. And there weren't so many of them because Rabbi Wein teaches us that the next paragraph, have a look at this, an enormously highly trained group from the Syrian Greek army, 50,000 men against about 12,000 probably overweight, uncoordinated Jews who had no formal training. Can you imagine that from a military perspective? They had herd of elephants, they had weapons, they had training. Judah the Maccabee marshaled his forces and with guile and courage outmaneuvered the far larger Greek army, forced it to divide and destroyed its various components, killing many thousands and forcing the survivors to flee to the north area. The last famous battle was the fortress of Antonios, which guarded the temple. When Antonios fell, the Jews came back to the temple. It took 25 years of fighting and a great many casualties on both sides until the Seleucid Greeks finally reached a peace agreement with the Jews. The goal of this source, and learning a little bit about the historical significance of the war, was the first miracle of Hanukkah was not the miracle that we all know. When you think of the festival of Hanukkah, and you think of what you might have learned in Hebrew school or on Google or the little pieces that we know about Hanukkah, what's the first thing you think about? We light a candle of oil for a number of days because of what? What happened? Anyone? Or no one before I start calling on people?
The miracle of the menorah.
Excellent. We think because the miracle of the oil lasted for 8 days. But here we're seeing a whole nother miracle. We're seeing a massive military victory. Not so well known, but very important. And the special prayer that we insert into our daily prayer service throughout the festival of Hanukkah is the Al Hanisim liturgy. I apologize that the class sources were not emailed earlier. I also can't add them to the chat because I don't have them. I will share it afterwards and to everyone who signed up for the class. I don't have it uploaded to a website to send a direct link right now. I apologize. In the days of Matisyahu, the son of the high priest of the Hasmonean and his sons, when the evil Greek kingdom rose up against your nation to make them forget your Torah, turn them away from the statutes of your will, your Nabbanamati stood by them in the time of distress. The important pieces in the Al Hanisim prayer here are both the military victory, but also the goal of the Greeks and the Hellenists. It wasn't just to kill the Jews. It was strip Judaism away from them, to extract the desire to be Jewish and to act Jewish. And we mentioned a moment ago the other miracle of Hanukkah, which is the most well-known piece of Hanukkah, which is the miracle of the oil. What is Hanukkah? When the Greeks, number 3 on the screen, when the Greeks entered the holy sanctuary, they defiled the oil that was there. When the dynasty of the Hasmoneans grew strong and defeated them, they searched out and found only one flask of oil with the seal of the high priest. The temple was serviced by the high priests and the Levites. And after the Jews took over the temple, after the Greeks had come in and it was decimated, and they wanted to reinaugurate the traditions and the daily rituals that happened in the temple, they needed to find olive oil that was uniquely sealed by the priests and had a little wax seal on the bottle. Think of it like a really good, high quality glass bottle of wine with a seal. And they only found one of these special bottles of oil. A miracle occurred. They lit the menorah from the oil for 8 days, and the following year, the sages established these days of praise and thanks. What's the miracle? Not a trick question. So we articulated there are 2 miracles. 8 is the military victory, and the second miracle, which we know well, which is the miracle of the oil. But let me ask a specific question. Put your caps on as a Talmud scholar. What is the actual miracle of the oil here? How many days did it last?
8 days.
It lasted 8 days. Does everybody agree?
Oh, maybe it was 7.
Because they had one dead for 1 day.
How many nights is Hanukkah?
8.
8 days.
8 days. How many nights were in the oil that they found?
It's
Enough
just-
to last for one day.
Yeah.
So how many nights is the miracle?
Actually 7, I think. 7.
Actually 7 is pretty right. Okay, think about that. Keep that in the back of your heads for a moment. That's from the Talmud, source number 3. Source number 4, the Rabbi Joseph Caro, Kabbalist, who wrote and articulated much of Jewish law, halacha, in the famous works of the Orach Chaim. He writes as follows. The reason they needed to light the menorah for 8 days in the very container was because all the Jewish people were ritually impure. They were tamei from the war. There is a law in Judaism that if you come in contact with a dead person, you need to ritually purify yourself. Now, all of these laws of ritual purifications and impurifications are kind of pushed to the side now because we don't have the temple. We're not going through with the rituals. So I don't need to be pure or impure. We're all impure because until the temple is in existence in Jerusalem, the relevancy of impurity is not so relevant to each of us day to day, certainly. But they needed to purify themselves. And it was impossible to make more oil because that's what someone's going to ask. What's the big deal? Why didn't they just make more oil? They couldn't make more oil because they were ritually impure. In addition to the 1 day required for the pressing of the olives and the procedure to prepare pure oil. Another Jewish philosopher, the Ran, writes in the opinion, source number 5, the 8-day period was necessary for a different reason. The pure oil was available at a distance for 4 days travel, and 8 days were necessary for the round trip. So they're there just to articulate it wasn't so easy to get more oil. And that underscores what aspect? It underscores the absolute miracle that the festival of Chanukah recognizes. Bottom of page number 2. We need to understand why Chanukah was established for 8 days. For since there was only enough oil in the flask for only 1 night, surely the miracle lasted for only 7 nights. Hey, you guys said that a moment ago. You guys are like Rabbi Caro. See, we can all be great Torah rabbi sages. One explanation is that they divided the oil in the flask into 8 portions, and each night they put 1 portion into the menorah, and it remained lit until the morning, so we find that a miracle took place each night. That's fascinating. They poured a little bit of oil every night, and the oil, which was only meant to last for a few minutes, lasted into the later hours of the evening. So it wasn't a miracle only on 1 night, but the miracle happened every single night. Another explanation is that after they poured the required amount of oil from the flask into the lamps of the menorah, the flask remained as full of oil as it had been originally, and the miracle was obvious even on the first night. Another explanation is that on the first night, they poured all the oil into the lamps, and it stayed lit all night. In the morning, they found the lamps full of oil, and this occurred on each of the 8 nights. 2 different ways of looking at the miracle, but the takeaway is that the miracle did in fact last for 8 nights. Questions? Comments, thoughts? Nothing? Silence? Is anybody there? Okay.
Here.
Listening, learning.
Okay. So let's go back to the sources and let's dig a little deeper.
I have a question.
Sure.
Didn't the first source say that they established that it was 8 nights the following year? Or did I misunderstand?
They made the festival be on the anniversary of this miracle. Next year during this time, we will make it a festival and continue it in perpetuity. Okay, great question. So to recap, there's actually 2 elements of the miracle here. There's the amazing military victory, and there's the victory and the miracle of the oil. And we went a level deeper to actually discern and unearth that the miracle of the oil actually has numerous miracles to it because of the way that we can interpret either which way that it happened. How do these 2 miracles come incongruous with each other? How do they connect, or are they actually very separate elements? So the Maharal, who was a famous Jewish rabbi, Rabbi Judah Loew, who lived in the city of Prague, writes very beautifully. He writes very beautifully on everything, but he writes very beautifully here, source number 7. I hope everybody can see the screen. Oh, that's a little too big, even for me. Okay. The essence of the establishment of the festival of Chanukah was the military defeat of the Greeks, except that it wasn't apparent to them that the victory was a miracle. Therefore, the miracle of the lights of the menorah was performed for them, so they would know that everything was a miracle from God. Blessed be He. What's he actually saying here? What do you mean that 12,000 Jews of no training defeating 50,000 trained Syrian Greeks would not be viewed as a miracle? How does that make sense? And that we needed to therefore add another element of the miracle so that they'd actually see, you know what, God was really behind this. What does he mean? So what he's actually saying is that even on face value, of course, the physical military victory was the hand of God. But who was on the front lines actually fighting the fight? It was the person. It was me. So therefore, it's easy for me to say it's because of me going out there for 20 hours a day and fighting the battle physically that it's my effort and my energy that made this a miraculous victory. Because when we put ourselves out there and we use our own energy, we can sometimes have a level of haughtiness and arrogancy and forget that everything that happens to us is happening to us because of the hand of God. And therefore, the Maharal suggested that we had an extra level of a miracle. So there would be no confusion that the military victory and the miracle of oil and everything that happened to the Jews at that time and the survival of Judaism was ultimately because of God controlling everything that was happening. Rabbi Pincus beautifully writes, source number 8. There are those who ask how we explain the words in the Al Hanissim, the special prayer that we add during Hanukkah. In those days at this time, how do we see miracles in our time? Because the text of the prayer that the rabbis composed was Bayamim Ahem, in those days, to those Jews thousands of years ago, Bazman Hazeh, in our time as well. What does that mean? All the miraculous stories are about events that happened in the past. The splitting of the sea, the Jews' passage in dry land, the miracle of the Jews' entrance to the land of Israel. Why is it that only those generations saw miracles, but we in our days don't see miracles? Was it early generations of the desert or the Hasmoneans that merited the witnessing of divine miracles? God governs the world through a system of nature and also by actual miracles. Miracles occur every single day. And because sometimes they don't affect us, we don't realize that they're happening around us. Just as certain sound waves exist in the world of atmosphere and can only be detected by special instruments, likewise, God provides man with plenty of miracles even in our time. But our challenge is to see them, to realize that they're happening, to open our eyes and open our ears. So when we say next week, beginning on Thursday night, and we add this to our prayers, Chanukah is there every year in the darkness and the cold of the winter. And certainly in this year, in the backdrop of the pandemic, to help us see the miracles that happen, both historically and are happening right now. Now, we can't ignore the pain and the tragedy and the devastation that is around us with so many people who have succumbed to this horrible plague, and people that are going through tremendously challenging times because of the plague. But we can't also ignore the miracles that are happening and the recognition that we are thankful for what we have: a roof over our heads, sustenance, employment, health, and that we shouldn't take any of that for granted. And Hanukkah comes and reminds us that every single year. And then we go one level deeper, because Hanukkah doesn't just tell us to celebrate, but the mandate of Hanukkah is to publicize the miracle. And the way that we're told to celebrate Hanukkah is not just that we want to feel it, experience it, we want to be proud of it, and we want to share that with those around us, near and far. The Talmud tells us that the direct, specific, and best place for your Hanukkah candles is right outside the entrance of your home. Now, let me just underscore, if you live in an apartment building like I do, don't put the Hanukkah candles in your doorway, because you might get evicted, and then you'll blame me, and that'll be problematic. But if you're ever in Israel around Hanukkah time, it's magnificent and beautiful to see these little glass boxes and everyone's lights kindled around their, on the doorsteps of their homes. And you walk the streets at dusk when it's just getting dark, and it's a beautiful array of flickering flames. And why do we do this? To publicize the miracle. I will talk about why we publicize the miracle in a moment, but certainly on a practical level, which we'll cover in a few minutes, all the practical elements of Hanukkah. Here we light the Hanukkah candles in our window, facing the outside. And a window is a unique place because a window both allows people from the outside to see in, but also allows us to still have the benefit of the candles. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. Source number 10. Our rabbis established that we should leave the Hanukkah light at the entrance of our homes, adjacent to the public thoroughfare. The menorah is placed on the left side of the entrance of the mezuzah on the right, symbolic that we are surrounded by mitzvot. What a beautiful idea. Publicize the miracle for all to see. In recent times, many people customarily leave the Hanukkah candles on a windowsill overlooking a public thoroughfare. One should not leave them on their table. Doesn't publicize the miracle, rather appears as lighting the candles light up his home. There's also an element of not using the Hanukkah candles for illumination and for light. So we'll talk about that in a moment, but they should light the candles on the windowsill so that you publicize the miracle. When do you light the Hanukkah candles? So the ideal time, says source number 11, is from sunset onwards. And why is that? And here the source extrapolates that it's the optimal time because that's when people would be passing through back on their way home from the marketplace. And we want to publicize the miracle as much as possible. We want people to see it. So people are walking through the marketplace on their way home at sunset, they would see the miracle. Nowadays, some of us are certainly going to be still out of the home or in the middle of our work days. The days getting darker earlier. It's preferable to light the candles as soon as you can when it gets dark. But if you're out and you're only getting home at 7, 8, 9 or later, then you light the candles as soon as you get home. Publicizing the miracle is not specifically to show others. It's for each person and his family to impress upon themselves one's family the clarity of Jewish faith.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
Please? The candle lighting for Shabbos, you light Hanukkah candles before Shabbos candles, yes? Just to confirm.
Anybody? Yes or no? Which one first?
Should be Hanukkah, right? Because as soon as you light Shabbos candles, Shabbos
Yeah.
officially starts. No?
That's it.
Be Hanukkah afternoon and then Shabbos.
That's it. They should be done in tandem. If you're done right one after the other, but the answer was correct, that once you light Shabbos candles, you have effectively brought Shabbos into your home and taken on Shabbos for yourself. So you can't therefore go and strike a match and light the Hanukkah candles. You light the Hanukkah candles just before you light the Shabbos candles. Great and important question. Hanukkah was established, says Rashi, says the famous scholar, for gratitude. We'll talk a little bit about why we need to have gratitude and how Hanukkah represents that. Any questions? Okay. When you get this in your inbox, actually everyone has this in their inbox because all of the Hanukkah information came out. If you scan a QR code here on your phone, you'll join a WhatsApp group where every day of Hanukkah, Rachel and I will send out a short video, a short inspirational idea for the month for each day of Hanukkah. Sorry. So if you want to take a moment, actually now you can do it. You hold up your phone, your iPhone or your Android to the screen with your camera, and you'll be able to scan that. Let's see if it works. Anyone willing? It worked?
It worked. Just did it.
I'll give everyone another moment to join if you want. Every day you'll get a short. Okay. Questions? Anybody? Okay. Let's continue. Some people are still joining class. Hello, Ruth. Okay, so Hanukkah. How do we do it? Where do we do it? What's it all about? So in the Ashkenazi tradition, each person in the family lights their own menorah. In the Sephardic tradition, the master of the house, one menorah per family. I grew up with every child lighting their own. I think it's a beautiful custom. It's something that children can do. Obviously, since it involves fire, it has to be done safely. But it's a beautiful custom to bring the kids into. It's a beautiful tradition to bring the children into, and certainly can excite people of all ages. And if you live with other people, if it's you and your spouse, you and your partner, or you and your children, I like the concept of everybody having one per person. And the beautiful thing about Hanukkah, unlike some of the other festivals that take a lot of preparation, that take sometimes a lot of resources, is it's really, really easy to celebrate Hanukkah. And I really think it's kind of a no-brainer because, you know, for $5-6, you get a packet of Hanukkah candles and you have to light candles every night with some blessings and you're done. It's great. You got to recognize what it means. You got to be inspired by the candles, but that's ultimately the call to action, which is digestible for each and every Jew. There are some blessings to recite, which are two blessings here. Lahadlik ner shel Chanukah, to light and to illuminate the Chanukah candles. And then the second blessing is a recognition that God made miracles to our forefathers and also is still making miracles for us today. These two blessings are recited every single night. We kindle the lights from left to right. It's a big debate in the Talmud, from right to left, left to right. Every family gets confused every year. They forget what they did last year. It's from left to right. And there are some passages, some text to recite during the lighting of the candles. This text is, I have it on the source sheets in a transliterated version, in the Hebrew and in the English. What do you do when you're looking at the Hanukkah candles? So the Hanukkah candles should burn for how long? Anybody?
30 minutes?
They should burn exactly for about 30 minutes after nightfall. It's preferable to use olive oil because that's the exact way that the miracle happened for the Maccabees. And you can, so again, we live in a amazing society and an amazing time where olive oil doesn't even need to be something difficult and challenging. You can go online on Amazon or to the local Jewish bookstore, to Judaica Classics on Lexington at 83rd, and you can buy these little plastic cups that are pre-filled with olive oil. So all you got to do is pop it on your menorah. You do not have to use oil. You can absolutely use candles, but oil is preferable if you would like. As I said, you light the candles by the windows to publicize the miracle. And if it's not practical to light on the windows for any reason, then you light it by the doorway. Even if the doorway is internal, light it by the doorway. The Hanukkah lights can be kindled as late into evening as possible. Preferably, people need to be awake when you're lighting candles. And as I said, it should remain illuminated for 30 minutes. There's another special candle called the shamash, which is the helper candle. You take a match or a lighter, You light the shamash, you recite the blessings on the shamash, and then you use the shamash to light the respective other candles. Shabbat, excellent question, which was asked earlier by Sharon. Light the Hanukkah candles before Shabbat candles. After Shabbat, when you have the Havdalah ceremony, what do you do first?
Havdalah.
You make Havdalah, and then you light Hanukkah candles. When you are lighting on Friday Eve, you should try and light bigger candles or longer candles, because they have to light half an hour into nightfall. So they have to make sure they don't run out of wax or oil. There are many, many customs around the festival of Hanukkah, and they're all connected to one major theme. So here I wrote just a few of them. I wrote latkes, donuts, spin the dreidel, Hanukkah gifts. What's the theme here?
Celebration?
Oily,
Celebration, for sure. Anything else?
Well,
oily foods.
Oily foods, excellent. And it's very simple. We use foods that are heavily dripping in oil, because oil was the primary element for which the miracle took place. So I'm not making any dietary or menu choices for each of you. But if you're going to be super cool and health oriented and bake your latke and not use any oil, you've really got to question whether it's really in celebration of Hanukkah. Now, you can have savory latkes. You can have latkes filled with applesauce. Some people use sour cream. Some people use salt. But if you're not even going to use oil, and you can use avocado oil, you can use coconut oil, but if you're not going to use any oil, then it's not really a latke. And we could argue this for a long, long time, but everybody would lose and I would win. Donuts are the same thing. A donut is an oil-filled delight. And then there's a dreidel. Where did the dreidel come from? And what is the dreidel? The dreidel is a little spin top that you spin. And it's inscribed the Hebrew letters on each side, which are Nun, Gimel, Hey, and Shin. Where did this come from? What is this custom? And it's an acronym for the Hebrew sentence of Nes Gadol Haya Sham, which means a great miracle happened there. And what's the origin of playing this game? So the origin is simple, that during times of persecution, when Torah study and active Jewish life was forbidden, Jewish children wanted to figure out a way to still partake in the holiday and still figure out a way to celebrate and recognize the holiday. So they would pull out a dreidel, they would pretend to be playing whenever soldiers or army came around, but they would always go back to learning when they weren't under the thoughtful watch of the persecutors. So it's a game and it's a gimmick, but it's inherently laid with such a powerful lesson about Jewish history. And it symbolizes that throughout the four major exiles, throughout history that Jews have experienced, what are they? The Babylonian, Persian, Greek, and Rome. That just like the Jews spin their dreidels and children spin their dreidels, each of these empires has had moments in the sun, but each of them spins away as well. And that the Jews, the minority, the less well-trained army, the smaller in number, the guerrilla army, not the well-trained army, in any one of those experiences with those great nations has survived. So when playing the dreidel is a little bit more in depth to it than simply a game. And in history, as with the dreidel itself, there are only two things that remain constant. The point on which it revolves and the handle above. And the point on which the dreidel revolves symbolizes in many ways the Jewish people were always grounded. And the hand above symbolizes the divine providence from God. There's a powerful lessons found within the dreidel itself. And many have established the custom of giving gifts on Chanukah as well. And there's many different disputes actually where the gifts comes from and where the concept of gifts comes from. Certainly, it definitely has origins, given that it's the same time as Christmas, and in many homes, gifts are given around Christmas. But all these, even eating of the latkes and the donuts and the dreidel, they're all customs. The main elements of Chanukah are lighting every single night, using the light of the candles to sit and gain joy from, and fulfilling through the prayers the blessings that are recited. It's okay to give presents. It's not sacrilege. It's allowed. You don't need to be excessive about it. You don't need to be excessive about anything. You don't have to give a different present every night, that's for sure. But you certainly can give presents and allow it to be enjoyed. Want to share a few, one final insight and then a story about Chanukah. Are there any questions? So in everyone's day-to-day, and I don't know what everybody does professionally, for students, if we're studying, but I'm pretty confident that everyone feels pretty busy every day in a myriad of different things. And there isn't a day that goes by, to me at least, where someone doesn't tell me how busy they are. We all feel that we're busy, and I would even argue that in pandemic zone, we're even busier because we're doing so much more with less free time. We're not commuting, so we're just stuck at home, and we're just living in a constant struggle of busyness. And busyness in and of itself is an epidemic that's actually wreaking havoc on so much of our life. Now we could argue, and there would be a lot of positive arguments that has changed because of Corona. But we could equally argue the other side, that it's also intensified in many ways because of Corona. It's not a new 21st century phenomenon. And rabbis and Jews and our ancestors have dealt with busyness for hundreds and thousands of years as well. And the great sage Hillel speaks about this. He says, don't say that when I have free time, I'm going to learn. And basically what he's saying is that on the surface, perhaps he was teaching that no one can predict when they're going to have free time. So don't procrastinate, take charge, take that opportunity. And I think the Chanukah festival comes along and shows us that it can create for each of us much needed space and a margin in our lives. Because after lighting the Chanukah candles, the text that we say, and I want to point to it here, in the Hebrew, it says, Ein lano rishut lehishtamesh bahen. And this is the famous paragraph that Jews all around the world recite after they light candles. And what does it mean to say, Ein lano rishut lehishtamesh bahen? We have no permission to make use of the candles, but to see them. It's forbidden to use the light of the Chanukah candles to engage in any activity. You can't turn the lights off and use the Chanukah candles to watch Netflix. You can't turn the lights off and use the Chanukah candles to have dinner. You can't use the candles for anything except for one thing. And the power of the Chanukah candle is not to provide light to increase our busyness that we all experience every day, but rather it's there to interrupt our busyness each night for 8 nights, to sit next to the candles, to reflect and to look at the glory and the joy of the candles. And as we step next Thursday night and begin this festival, and I hope everyone joins us with the Zoom link, 8 o'clock to 8:20, so we can join together with the Kraus family for Chanukah lighting, as we light the menorah for the next 8 days. Let's make a commitment, not just for the festival of Chanukah, but beyond, to ourselves and to our loved ones, to break the perceived busyness and to realign our time for what matters most. Because if we can't make time for what matters most, then we're missing out on so much. So Chanukah has a very relevant message. And if you join the WhatsApp group, Rachel and I will be sending out a video every single day. Look forward to journeying together, to being inspired together. And I want to close with a question, with a story, sorry. I'll share the sources for tonight's class in an email tomorrow. Also, I want to make sure everybody saw in today's email, there's a one-page Chanukah overview that has the blessings and has some songs. On the sources you'll see here that I'll send out, there's some Chanukah songs and then some wonderful Chanukah songs. And of course, the famous Adam Sandler song. I might even record it for you and sing it because I really like it, but you might not want to watch it because I'm not that good. But you can Google Adam Sandler's song. He's very funny. I want to share a story about a childhood hero of mine. And he just came out with another book. And the childhood hero is someone by the name of Natan Sharansky. Natan Sharansky lives in Israel, but he grew up in the former Soviet Union, and he was arrested in 1977 for his Zionist activism and his insistence on the right of Russian Jews to make it their desire to live in Israel if they want. And for those of you that know any Jewish history or world history about the former Soviet Union, it was not possible to practice your Judaism. And it wasn't possible to publicly or privately practice your Judaism. He was ultimately imprisoned in 1977 through 1986. And there were public protests here in America, and his wife Avital went on hunger strikes, and our very own Rabbi Lookstein was at the forefront of championing the human rights for him to be released. He made Aliyah, he moved to Israel when he was released, and he actually established a Russian immigrant party in 1996 and became a minister for Israel's interior, industry of trade, and then interior, and then just recently became the chairman of a body called the Jewish Agency. He's got some amazing books and memoirs, and he shares the story in one of his books, and I want to share it with you tonight because it inspires me every single year. And he writes as follows, and I'm going to paraphrase a little bit from his book. The book is called Fear No Evil, and it's actually, the title of the book is taken from Psalms. And he said, and he writes magnificently in the book, that he had a little book of Psalms that he carried with him the whole time in the Gulag, in his imprisonment, in his solitary confinement. And he writes as follows. He says that the holiday of Chanukah was approaching, and he was the only Jew in his prison zone. And when he explained to the prison warden and his guards what Chanukah was, that it's a holiday of national freedom, of returning to one's culture, he figured out that they weren't going to allow him to celebrate Chanukah at all. But he got together a few other Jews in other areas of the prison, and they figured out that they'd try and whatever they can do to celebrate Chanukah. So they even put together scraps, and they made a little wooden menorah. They decorated it. They found some elements they could use for candles. And on the first evening, they lit candles, recited the prayer. He didn't know what prayer to recite, so he made it up. And he did the second night, the third night. He took out his menorah every single night. He recited the beautiful, beautiful blessings. He blew out the candle, and he saved it for the next night. On the sixth night of Chanukah, the authorities confiscated his Chanukiah. And he wanted to know why. He said, I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm doing it privately. I'm not making a big raucous. And he said, actually, in 2 days, the festival's going to be over. Just give me 2 more days to light the Chanukah candles. That's all I want. And they said, no. He said, our camp here in the Gulag is not a synagogue. And we're not going to let you publicly display your Judaism. And he was surprised by the bluntness, and he went on a hunger strike. Now, herein lies what the challenge. A few days later, the regional major was coming to survey and to tour the prison. And they didn't want to have any of their inmates on a hunger strike. because a hunger strike is usually as a result of something that happened to them. And when the big boss comes to survey the scene and to check out the prison, they want to make sure that everything is perfect, that there's no hunger strikes, there's no repairs that need to be done, there's no issues, because they all want to get a high grade for their job. So they were struck with a challenge. What do we do? How do we get him to eat? So he went to the officer's, head warden's office, and he had a discussion. And he writes very, very articulate language. He says this Major Olson was a very flabby man, around 50, small eyes, puffy eyelids. And he invites him into his office to talk about what they can do. And he said, give me back my menorah. Tonight is the last evening of Chanukah. Let me celebrate it now, and I'll end the hunger strike. And Olson says, what is this menorah? He says, it's candlesticks. And then Olson said, but a protocol for its confiscation has already been drawn up. It's already documented. I can't give it back to you because then I look like I have no authority. So Natan Sharansky looked at him in his office, in the Gulag, in Siberia, and says, listen, just give me 20 minutes. You and me right here, right now. Take the menorah from wherever it is, bring it to your office, let me light it, let me enjoy the candles, I'll blow them out, and I won't tell anybody this ever happened, but it's the last night of the festival. So he said, okay. I convinced him. So he came back with the menorah, and he went, and just before he's about to light the menorah, he says, actually, we have to stand up, because you recite the blessing standing. And just as he's about to recite the blessing standing up, he said, you got to cover your head. So he went and got his Russian army hat. And Natan Sharansky, who didn't have a siddur, didn't know what prayer to recite, was making up the prayers. And there he made up a prayer in his broken Hebrew. And he writes as follows. He said, blessed are you, God, for allowing me to rejoice on this day of Chanukah, the holiday of our liberation, the holiday of our return to the way our forefathers have done it. And blessed are you, God, for allowing me to light these candles. May you allow me to light these candles with my wife and my children in the city of Jerusalem. And then he paused. He looked dead into the eye of the major, the prison warden, the highest ranking officer in the prison. And he added the following sentence in Hebrew. And may the day come soon when all our enemies who are today planning our destruction will stand before us and hear our prayers and say Amen. And he turned to the prison warder and says, when I finish the blessing, you say Amen. So he says Amen. And the prison warden echoed back this answer of Amen, and he sat down. And Natan Sharansky goes on to write that here I was in Siberia, a country and a land where I couldn't exercise my Judaism. I couldn't exercise my right to go to Israel, but I managed to go ahead and go through with Chanukah, even in the most challenging, trying times. And not just go through with Chanukah, the prison warden answered Amen to a blessing about his destruction. Chanukah is a wellspring of Jewish inspiration. It represents a miracle that happened to our ancestors, but it also allows us to see all the miracles that happen to us every single day. I hope everyone gained from tonight's discussion around Chanukah, learned a little bit about the military victory and the victory of the oil, and that we'll all begin Chanukah next Thursday night with a little deeper understanding and some practical knowledge of what to do. Feel free to email me with any questions. I'll send a link out to the recording as well as the sources for tonight's class. And please check your inboxes for more information. Please join the WhatsApp group so you'll be able to receive daily nuggets of inspiration. And hopefully, if you're in person with us in Manhattan and able to join us this coming Saturday for Shabbat services, as well as Sunday week the 13th in Carl Schurz Park for a socially distanced, safe public Chanukah lighting with our friends of Chabad of the Upper East Side. Any questions? Practical questions? Not so practical questions? Nothing. Have a good night. Please join us at 8:45 for pre-Shabbat inspiration tonight with our special guest, Rabbi Eli Weinstock. 8:45, right back here on the comfort of your couch, your table, your bed, or wherever you may be. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you, Rabbi Kraus. I'll see you later.
Thank you, Rabbi Kraus.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.